It's been a...
Just a minute. Okay, hello and welcome everyone to Transformational Tuesdays. We have with us here today, Jonathan Reitz, and he is an MCC at CoachNet and CoachNet Fluxify's Director for Training and CEO. He holds the MCC credential in the ICF and is also the co-founder of the Team Coaching Global Alliance and has been featured multiple times on the W Business and Executive Coaches Summit, WBEX, what we were just speaking about. He's written coaching hacks, simple strategies to make every conversation more effective, and he's a member of the faculty in the Weatherhead School of Management coaching program at Case Western. He lives in Cleveland, Ohio with his wife Joy and daughter Julia. The topic today that Jonathan is here to discuss is reviewing recordings, why reviewing recordings of our coaching is a critical success habit. Nobody enjoys hearing recordings of their own voice, but for coaches, it's a must-have. And today, Jonathan will explore the key lessons coaches can take from building such a habit. Thank you and welcome, Jonathan. Handing it over to you from now.
All right, thank you very much. Now, how many of you can put this in the chat area or you can raise your hand if you're on video, but how many of you can relate to the feeling that when you hear a recording of your own voice, you think to yourself, I don't sound like that, or that's not what I sound like, or even, and I've had this response a couple of times, there must be something wrong with the recorder because that's not me. That's not what it sounds like. So yeah, so I'm seeing in the chat area, I felt that way. Oh, I really don't sound like that. You know, I've processed this issue already. Felt like that since I was young. Well, the truth of it. So we've got some hands raised. I seeing that as well. Now here's the reality. Do you know what's going on there? You know, that's actually a physiological reality, that we do sound differently on a recording than we do when we hear ourselves in our own head. Do you know why? Do you know why that is? You know, the reality of that. Do you know why this is actually the case? Well, it's because when we hear a recording of ourselves, that sound comes out of the speaker, whether it's on your phone or you know, back in the old days, when you used to listen to a recording on from a cassette or one of those old school audio recording devices, that sound would come out of the speaker and it would go directly into our ears, and that sounds clean and unaffected, unfiltered. Now, when we're speaking, something different happens. It's tempting to think that, you know what, the sound is coming out of my mouth, it's getting out into the room here, and then it's entering my ears just like everything does, and it should sound just like it does on the recording. Well, there's actually something else going on as well. Yes, that does happen, but we also have the sound that gets generated in our throat in what's called our voice box, that goes through our head, through the rest of our head, and then gets to the area where sound is picked up. So we've actually got two different sources of audio happening, sound happening when we're speaking. And when we just hear something from our phone or from our computer, all we hear is that direct piece. The part that runs through our actual heads is not actually influencing what it sounds like. So with that in mind, I just want to give you encouragement, a bit of an endorsement, a moment where we say, you know what, you're not wrong. You're not thinking about this incorrectly. It actually is different when you hear a recording of yourself versus when you hear when you hear yourself speaking in the course of a regular conversation. It actually is physiologically different because all the cells, the bones, your tongue, the pieces of your mouth, they're all vibrating when you talk. And then the parts of your ear that pick up sound vibrations are also picking up those vibrations. So that is actually the reality you are dealing with. You are hearing something different when you listen to a recording than when you listen to yourself speak out loud. So I don't want you to let that be a discouragement. I don't want you to let the fact that you just sound different to be a reason why you don't review recordings of your coachings. I am here to tell you that I would suggest reviewing recordings of my own coaching is the single thing that has improved my coaching skills the most over my coaching career. I've been coaching since 1997. I built a habit of developing, of reviewing my own coaching recordings about 10 years ago. And my coaching skills went like this as a result of it. And over the next 45 minutes or an hour or so, I'm going to reveal to you the things I've learned and maybe make some suggestions for you for how you can review your recordings for maximum impact and improve your coaching skills as a dramatic amount in a short period of time. Okay, so that's what we're going to take on in today's conversation. So let me start by asking a question, just a direct and blunt question. Do you review recordings of your own coaching? You know, I'd love to see you throw that in the chat area. Just yes or no. You know, do you ever review recordings of your own coaching? Yes, seldom, but have done it. No. You know, yes, okay, good. Sometimes, good. Seldom, haven't started. Yes, I have done it. Hey, Sashin, how are you? Good to see you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you jumping in. I have to. Okay, sometimes, not always. Sometimes. I'm going to suggest a regular habit. It's cringeworthy. Oh, I know. Samina, I know that feeling. I know that feeling. It does take some time to get over it. Now, I'm going to suggest that if you're an ICF coach, it's really tempting. It's really tempting to never review another recording after you get your credential. But I'm going to suggest to you that you are missing an incredible opportunity to improve your coaching skills if you don't. Now you say clients have some challenge. You know, this is interesting. I hear this all the time. I hear this on a regular basis. Coaches say to me, because I'm a big advocate for recording coaching sessions. Coaches say to me, the clients get very cringy when I ask them, you know, I really struggle to get a client who will allow me to record. I have never run into that. Not in 25 years, not in almost 25 years have I ever run into a client saying, I don't want to be recorded. And here's how I've gotten around that. Here's how I've gotten around that. You know, I literally have never. I can think of one person in all these years that said, I don't want to be recorded. And I deal with that by saying, okay, I'm going to record this. Here's what I tell them two things. Here's what I'm going to use it for. And I tell people exactly who's going to have access, who's going to hear the recording. And in my case, I don't share it with anybody. It's just for my own review. Now, the second thing I do is I make the recording available to the client. And that eliminates in fact, I flat out say, you know, after this date, and it's typically 2 weeks, 30 days at the most. After this date, if you want to delete it, you can. And when you delete it, I will lose access to it. I give all the control with the exception of a short time window to the client. And I see Eddie's comment, hey, recording in this part of the world makes the process look suspicious. I've recorded coaching clients in 79 countries. And with those guidelines, that has answered the process. That has answered those questions. Just saying, hey, look, I will first of all tell you who's going to hear it. And if that changes, I'm going to ask permission. Secondly, I'm going to give you the control of whether or not the recording exists beyond the 30-day window from the process. Now, and Megan says, not always suspicious if we take the agreement from the client from the beginning in the contract. Yes, by the way, put that in your contract. We're going to talk about how that works later on in the course of the conversation. Now, Joshna says, I've noticed a difference with the client being more vulnerable when they are not recorded. Ask them if you noticed the difference from last session, that you can tell what worked and what didn't. More open and vulnerable. Interesting, because I've actually had the opposite experience. When they know it's being recorded and they have access to the recording, they become more open and vulnerable because they know that they can just process being in the moment. They can go back and listen to it later and confirm the content of the conversation. So I think I think what you're observing, Joshna, is a real thing. But there is also, let me say that differently. I think that's a real thing. I think that's a real scenario. And I think you can end up in a different place if you give the client an opportunity. Now, I will not ever say to you, add recording your conversations in the middle of a coaching engagement. Don't do that. Negotiate it from the beginning and keep it in place the entire time. So that's a critical component. Now, if you are an American coach, and I'm guessing there are a couple of coaches from America here in this conversation. If you are an American coach, you're going to want to get in the habit of recording every session, because the laws in this country are about to change, and you're going to want to have those options. You're going to want to have that documentation. It's going to be very, very difficult to get liability insurance in the United States very soon if you don't record every session. So just know that this is a leading topic, and this is one of the core components. Now, Sophia says, hey, what about if the client declines to be recorded? In my case, if the client declines to be recorded, I refer them to a different coach. In my case. Now, that I'm very fortunate. I'm in a situation where I can do that. Not every coach can. But if the client declines to be recorded, you have to decide if you're going to continue to work with it, if you're going to work with them or not. And in my particular case, I refer them to someone else. And like Noel says in the chat area, I find it easier to convince them to record without video by using an audio. Yeah, I do too. I do too. I think that's that's definitely something to consider. Now, all this to say that building habits around making and evaluating and listening to recordings, making and evaluating those recordings can really accelerate your coaching skills. And there's 3 keys to that. First of all, you got to manage the experience. You got to know exactly what you're working for. You know, why are you doing this? Why do you want to include these recordings in your review process? Why do you want to jump into, going through the process of getting your client's permission and recording things and moving along those lines? And then when you have the recordings in hand, what actually are you looking for? We're going to look at 4 lenses that I think can teach you things that are specifically helpful in the ongoing coaching process. You're going to take aim at the right things. And then we'll look at some recording best practices for how to make the most of the process. All right. So let's do this. Let's get at it. First and foremost, let's talk about managing the experience. to make the most of the opportunity. We have to pick up where we were a couple of moments ago and just acknowledge nobody likes hearing their own voice, their own recorded voice. Nobody enjoys that. Nobody has the response when you hear themselves on tape going, "Oh man, I sound good." Nobody thinks like that. It's much more of, yikes. What did Samina say a couple of minutes ago? They're cringeworthy. Yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there. Let's just have a moment of shared human existence right now, and just think about that moment where we're 100% clear that we're uncomfortable hearing our own voice. Yep, been there. Yep, we can all picture what it feels like. Now let it go, because there's good news. There's good news. Nobody else, when they listen to it, is cringing. Seriously, nobody else is listening to it when they cringe. I'm just gonna observe something here, that I'm an assessor. I'm an ICF assessor. I run an accredited coach training program. I listen to a lot of coaching and a lot of coaching triads on a weekly basis. And well, we're all friends here, right? I can speak clearly. I can speak directly to something, right? It's okay if I'm transparent here for a minute. Some of the coaching I listen to is really not good. It's rough because it's brand new. It's very early on in the process. People are learning new coaching conversations. People are learning new opportunities, new skills. So sometimes it's not very good, but it's never cringy. Because here's the thing about coaching and coaches. It's, name me another group of people that defines their own success on whether or not someone else is effective. Because think about it. Think about coaching. Think about coaching. It has, whether or not a coach is really successful, is really effective, doesn't really have to do with, did I follow the ICF competencies? That's a way to get the thing that we really want. And I want to challenge you to remember why people come to coaches. People come to coaches to accomplish something that they can't accomplish on their own. So with that being our motivation, with that being the thing that drives us, this is the thing that makes a tremendous difference in what goes on in those coaching conversations. So we might be cringing hearing our own voice, but the person on the other end of the conversation is going, "Oh, this is my coach. This is the person that's going to help me. This is the person that's going to help me get to the thing that I can't get to on my own. Oh my gosh, I am so excited to talk to that person." And I'm going to suggest that if you remember that as you're thinking about your recordings, the cringe factor goes away. It doesn't become this awkward moment of agony. It's much more, hey, I'm here to help this person. Let's see how that went. Let's see how that what happens here. Now, here's the other thing. And again, I'm gonna you got to remember, I'm an ICF assessor. I run a training school. I have an MCC. I'm the president of my local ICF chapter. I'm pretty invested in the ICF world, but the ICF does us a disservice on this particular topic. I want you to think about this. Because if we really remember why people come to coaches, is they come to coaches to get something done, to change, to be different, something that's out of reach on their own. But what does the ICF measure on our credential reviews? Coach behavior, which is not what coaching is about. What coaching is about is helping that other person change. So that's the lens we have to listen to when we review our own recordings. What am I doing that is going to help that other person change? We have to listen differently when we evaluate our coaching conversations. The whole goal of what we do as coaches is to help other people. Yes, all of us, every single one of us. Every single one of us can demonstrate how the ICF core competencies are supposed to sound in a coaching conversation, right? We've all learned that. We're all well trained. But it doesn't matter if the client doesn't walk away with something valuable to them. So that's. In fact, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna pause here just for a second, because if you don't take anything else away from this hour of conversation except for that the point of coaching is to help the other person change or grow or do things differently or accomplish something that they couldn't have accomplished without us. If you don't take anything else away from this hour except that, I will consider this a success. I will consider this time worthwhile, because that's why people come to us. It's not because, oh my gosh, you know what I love about my coach? My coach only asks open-ended questions. No client has ever said that. Oh my gosh, you know what I love about my coach? My coach makes the best coaching agreements. No client has ever said that. Or here's my favorite one. Here's my favorite one. Oh, you know what? You know what I love about my coach? My coach holds space for me. No client has ever said that. But you know what clients do say? You know what? I got this project done at work and it was a huge success and my coach was incredibly helpful. That's the stuff clients say. You know what? I discovered these 6 things about myself, and as a result, I am now working very differently. And my coach was helpful for that. Now, the truth of it is that the coaching skills that we use help make those things happen. Yeah, Sachin says, yeah, these are all enablers. Yeah, right. That's it exactly. You know, that's how we get them there. That's how we get them there. It's not the point. The point is that we get them there. And these are the things we're listening for in our recording. So the big challenge is that we have to help our clients take aim. We have to take aim at the right things when we listen to the recording. So let's spend the next few minutes looking at some of the things you can learn from listening to your own recordings. All right. Now, first and foremost, you can learn from your recording. You can evaluate how you're doing with the structure of the coaching conversation. One of the things, and this is a somewhat I'm going to make a somewhat controversial, as if I haven't already made at least one somewhat controversial statement, but I'm going to make another one here coming up in a moment. In a coaching conversation, the coach provides the structure of the conversation. No, not everybody believes that. You know, some coaches say, well, you know what, you don't provide the structure. You just go where the client wants to go. Well, isn't that a structure? You know, the coach has to provide the structure of the conversation. And I always think of a coaching conversation as a beginning, a middle, and an end. In the beginning, we're setting targets, we're tying in goals. In the middle, we're doing the deep dive, we're doing the exploration. And in the end, we're circling back to learning and action. So there's kind of three phases. So when you listen to your recordings, you can have, one of the things I would urge you to do is say, how am I doing in providing structure to this conversation? You know, if you listen to Samina mentioned earlier that I did a demonstration for WBEX yesterday. If you listen to that, that had a very clear structure to it, where we first laid some groundwork and then we dove deep. Now it took about 2 minutes to lay the structure. You know, it was a 30 or 35-minute conversation. And it took about 2 minutes to lay the right structure. It took about another minute and a half to get to an insight that my client was going, oh, this changes everything. And it was just through the process of him having to force the words out of his mouth. Then finally, he got to the place where, all right, after he had wrestled with that for a while, he got to the place where he was able to say, you know what, I see the road forward. So it happened in a very intentional, very structured kind of way. And when you listen to your recordings, that's the first thing you can check. Now, the second thing you can check is you can look at how the client provides the content, the substance of the session. You know, is the client bringing the things that really matter to them? I think you can hear that. I think there's something in tone of voice, or you can talk about impact. You can talk about what the client might discover is meaningful. So when you listen to your recording, I think you can hear, you know, is the client bringing things that actually matter to them to the conversation? I would check that, because I want that. I want my clients talking about stuff that actually matters to them, instead of, you know, the weather or you know, that's a bad example. Football scores, you know, that's a bad example. But you know, that's the kind of thing, is the client bringing stuff that actually makes a difference for them. And then the third thing you can learn about from your recordings, I think, is there's a thing called discovery. And I would argue that what discovery is the combination of structure and content. Where if you as the coach are conducting the conversation in a way that works for your client, and the client is bringing things that actually matter to them, the possibility exists that the client's going to end up going somewhere interesting and useful that they maybe haven't thought about before, that they might be able to reach in a different way. Maybe even the aha moment. Yeah, right, Josh. No, that's a great insight. Now, I appreciate Nawal's comment here in the right above that. Based on what you decide to hear, this recording and not do you have criteria for being selected? I'm going to come to that. So I will answer that, but I will tell you how I choose what to listen for, review. But I'm going to do that in a few minutes. Okay, so I do appreciate it. And by the way, anytime you put any question you want in the chat area, I'll be happy to spend a moment on those in the courses, and we will have some time for question and answers at the end of all this. So please throw that in there, and we'll dive into all of this. So yeah, I would suggest these three areas are where you get the big learning for your habit of listening to recordings. Now, which of these do the ICF evaluate? I think they evaluate all three of these areas. I would argue the ICF evaluates all three of these areas. But the structure, the coach provided structure, is the most important part. That's the thing we're really listening for. When you get to the MCC level, I think the other two are more on the table, but the structure is the thing. And there is a, I don't want to call it magic, but there is a thing that happens in a coaching session that is hard to describe. And sometimes you can hear that. That's really what I'm describing when I talk about discovery. That you might get to hear that. I was talking to an MCC friend of mine, and he was telling me about his process for finding the 2 recordings that he sent in for his MCC. He said he took a group of 40 recordings, 40 recordings, and he threw out 30 of them right away. Okay. He said of the 10 that were left, 8 of them had really good structure, and the client brought some really good content. But there wasn't that much discovery where the client went, oh, aha, or oh, I see this now, or oh, wow. The discovery really only was front and center for 2 of the 40 recordings. And I don't know if that's the kind of proportion that actually is a piece of all of this, but I do think, really having that life-changing, the world looks different to me kind of discovery is unbelievable. I shouldn't say unbelievable. It's less common than you might think. So that's why listening for it, so you know what it sounds like when it comes up, is so important, so critical. Now, let's make this very, very practical. I'm going to suggest listening to a recording, you have 4 potential lenses. And I will tell you that when I select a recording to listen to, I listen to it twice. 2 different times with 2 different mindsets. 2 different mindsets. The first 2 are what I listen for in the first pass. I listen for, hey, where are context? Where are we in the arc of the engagement? What's going on for the client? How well am I doing grounding this coaching in what's actually happening around the client, for and around the client? That's what I mean by context. How are we doing keeping the coaching grounded in what matters to my client? And then by extension, how satisfied is my client with the conversation? How are we doing? And then coach performance lens, that's really about how did I do against the competencies? And I think that's critical. It's critical to listen with this lens. And if you're working on your ACC, these 2 lenses are enough. You can do this. This is enough for you to pay attention to pay attention to, am I delivering on the competency model? Am I connecting with my client to the level where the client is satisfied? That's enough. When you get to the PCC level, I think PCC or MCC level or the EMCC model really uses the 3rd and the 4th lens powerfully, which is how much of my client's goal did we deliver on, which is different than how satisfied is my client, because we might not hit the goal and the client could be completely satisfied with the session. Those are 2 different things. But if the purpose of the engagement is to work toward these particular things and your client has identified that this and this would be helpful in this session, let's make sure we delivered on it. Like, for example, I'll give you in yesterday's coaching demo, my client said he wanted a moment of clarity about what he wanted to work on, and he got that. He got it in like 3 minutes, which was really exciting and B, kind of daunting, because I was like, oh no, what are we going to do now for the next 30 minutes? Now that he had his moment of clarity. But thinking about that process where you say a client outcome, hey, what my client wants is this. How are we doing on delivering it? I think that's really that's an important lens. And yes, you can monitor that in the session, but it can be equally as helpful to look back at it when you listen to a recording. And then finally, we get into this whole discovery. Hey, where was my client surprised by the conversation? Where did my client go in an unexpected direction? Where did my client discover something that is that would be especially helpful? Where did my client have an aha moment? And then by extension, what did I do as the coach to help that discovery come about? What is it that I did that helped cause that aha, that OMG, look what we're accomplishing? How did that balance, or something shifted for the client and my coaching behaviors begin to cause it? That's a piece of this. Now here's how you think through this. I would suggest 2 passes, and maybe even 3 in some cases. So first of all, on the first time you listen to the recording, just listen to the structure. Listen for your coaching agreement. Listen to how much you talked compared to how much the client talked. That's a big one. Listen for open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions. Listen for, did you stack questions? Listen, did you get an action plan? Did you figure out somehow how to evaluate this? Listen for your partnership between coach and client. All of those kinds of things about your behavior can be really helpful when you listen to it the first time. Now, the second pass, you get into listening for the content. Did my client bring contributions that lined up for the purpose? Was my client ready to work, ready to be coached? What was my client's emotional state? Yeah, that's critical. Now Sophia says, hey, some of my clients get that aha moment and then go into an emotional state, maybe start crying. What do you do then? Well, I would urge you to review those kinds of recorded situations to see if you have any patterns when that happens. If that's happening all the time, well, first of all, good on you, because you're getting your clients to a place that matters to them. And then secondly, I would review those to see if you do the same thing every time, because doing the same thing every time in a moment like that probably isn't all that helpful. You have to understand the client. Now at a very baseline, I would say slow down at that moment. Take a deep breath, slow down. Let's see where this goes. Let's see where the rest of the conversation goes. The pace will probably drop, will probably slow down if the client begins to cry. And work really hard to ensure that you're only moving forward when the client is ready. That's really critical. It's really critical. And then finally, work hard. Yeah, be quiet. Yeah, the power of silence. The wall's right. The power of silence is, this is a time to not jump in. What I tell people in our training school is to be quiet just a little bit longer than is comfortable. And if you can, be quiet a lot longer than is comfortable. Because that person is processing the realization they just had. And they may or may not they may or may not be ready to continue the conversation. So if you have that, those would be a couple. Now, one last thing I'd throw out in that situation, I would urge you to make sure that your next question begins with the word what. Ask a qualitative question coming forward, not a quantitative question, a qualitative question coming forward. And invite them to think further about that. Now, if you're feeling good about your recording and you review it a third time, that's when you get to the discovery component. And you're not going to do every recording this way, but that discovery component where, hey, the clients had a light bulb moment, the clients had an aha, and they realize there's something moving forward. You might review how you handled those particular moments on a third pass, and that can be very, very helpful. That can be very, very helpful to just get a sense of how you handle those situations and what you might be able to do more of to cause those to happen more often. So that's a third process. All right, we've covered a lot of ground so far, and we're going to go just a little bit farther. But we've covered a lot of ground, and we're going to look at some best practices for reviewing these recordings. This is assuming you can get your clients to be recorded. We're going to spend a little bit of time thinking through it. First of all, best practice number one: make a regular schedule. I have 2 Saturday mornings a month where this is what I do. I review recordings. And I typically review one recording twice on that Saturday morning. It takes me about 3 hours. But make a regular schedule. And by the way, don't just make the schedule, follow the schedule. Sometimes it's good to be overly clear. Secondly, record every session. And the way I realize, I know, hey, this casts aspersions on the process. It makes people uncomfortable. Yes, it might. But if you can present it as, this is a service that I'm providing you. I'm going to provide you the recording so that you can just think about what's important in the conversation. And then you can review the recording later at your convenience. You can present that as a service to your clients that often takes the fear of being recorded away. Truthfully, it also changes your mindset as a coach, saying, hey, this is a service I'm providing to the clients. I just want to make sure that everything that's important is documented here so my clients can review this in a way that would be helpful for them. So that's a piece of the puzzle to think through how all this might come together. So record every session as best you can. Is it advisable to review the recording with the client? I'm going to stop short of saying advisable because I don't know. I don't know if it's advisable, but I will say that if a client wants to revisit something in coaching, and use the recording to do that, I will do that with the client. But I don't review the recording with the client. If you think it might be a growth opportunity for you, then I don't see a downside to it. But I will be honest with you, I've never done that, Sophia. I've not gone down that road. Now I can understand why you're asking, I think, and maybe there's something really valuable there, but that's not a habit that I have. All right. So sharing with the client as a service, this is a way, again, to help the client be comfortable with being recorded, and to give you a better. It's a way to differentiate your service. Doesn't work for everybody, but some coaches do provide that as an option. You put a permission clause in your agreement. You put a permission clause right there. It's right in my contract. It's about 4 lines long in my contract. It says something like, have permission to record every session. Recordings will be shared with the client. Client can determine whether or not how long the recording exists in my storage area, and there will not be copies made. Client can delete the recording at any time, and that's a core component. Now, you being responsible and ethical about those recordings, I think, is a great way to communicate what, to demonstrate that you do follow the code of ethics and you are a meaningful and responsible coach. So I would say put that in your agreement. Don't do this. Don't record somebody where you don't have this line in your agreement. And that means you're going to negotiate it up front. You're going to negotiate the use up front, and just tell them flat out, hey, look, I'm trying to sharpen my skills. People want to help other people. And if you position this to your client as, look, I'm trying to sharpen my skills, and you can help me with this by giving me permission to record our sessions and review our sessions. Now, some coaches put a window of a date in their agreement. They say, it'll be deleted on this date. I don't do that. I let the client choose. So there are some options about that. So that would be a best practice, is make sure that that's in your agreement. So there's no question about when it's being recorded and when it's not. I'll also say to you that I have the client initial that section in my agreement so that I know they have seen it. I want them to initial it. The signature is on the bottom of the contract, but there's an initial on 3 or 4 things, and this is one of them in the contract. All right. So put a permission clause in your agreement. Have a target. Don't just listen to your recordings to listen to your recordings. Always be working on some part of your coaching, some part of your competencies. Like for example, right now, I'm working on evokes awareness. It's competency number 7 in the ICF coaching map. I'm in my own coaching. I'm working on evokes awareness. I'm trying to find other ways beyond just powerful open-ended questions to help my clients come to new realizations. I'm working on evokes awareness. So that's what I'm listening for in my recordings, is how am I doing evoking awareness in my clients? How am I doing helping my clients really become focused on the things that matter to them? I would urge you to make sure you have a target or a goal. Don't just say, hey, I want to be the best coach I can be. That's not specific enough. We grow, we improve because we're working on something specific, and we're being objective about what we do well and what we don't do well, and trying to improve. All right, use a transcript. I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, Jonathan, I don't. Now I have to. Not only do I have to listen to my coaching conversations, I have to transcribe them as well. Maybe. But the other thing I would throw out to you is that there are websites like otter.ai, and I'll put that in the chat area here. Otter.ai, that's a website that'll give you 100 hours of transcription every month for like $100 US annual fee. So $100 for a year, $8 a month, gives you 100 hours every month of transcription. This is what I do with them. I'll record the session, I upload it to Otter, I send the link to Otter to my client, so my client has access to it. And if they want to delete it, they can delete it from there. And I've already destroyed the recording, the master recording. So that's the process I use. And sometimes seeing what you say in writing can be very, very helpful. That can take you to a new place. That can give you new and meaningful insights. All right, two more. Wait a while before you listen. Here's how I decide what to listen for. I keep a little scoring tab in my notes. I do take notes while I coach, but they're notes that they're mostly for me to stay on track. I'm very easily distracted. I can be very easily distracted. So I take notes so I don't forget what my client has said. Those are for me. Those are about me. I do give a copy to my client. Same deal as with the recording. They can delete them whenever they want. I do give a copy, but I don't listen to a session until I've forgotten what happened in it. So typically I wait 30 days to listen to a session so that I can be surprised by what happens. And I'm more able to be objective. If I listen to something right after it happens, it's either awesome. Oh my gosh, Jonathan, you are such a good coach. That's me talking to me. Or it's terrible. Like, oh, how did they ever give you a credential? You should probably be ACC. So I like to wait 30 days or 6 weeks before I listen to a session because I can be more objective that way. And you might find that you are also put that way. And then secondly, don't listen to the same client twice in a row. You know, especially if your coaching is different from client to client, you might find that you need to allow yourself to show the range of your coaching, So that's one criteria about what I listen to. When was the last time I listened to this client? Second thing I look at is how did I think the session went in the moment? Because I want to listen to sessions that I thought either went really well or that didn't go well. I'm not really that interested in the ones in the middle because those are harder to improve. And then I keep track of the pattern. So that's how I decide what to listen to. And I have between 10 and 15 sessions a week. So I'm relatively busy as a coach. And so I have a number of things to think through. I have a number of sessions to choose from. And then I also keep track of who I listen to on what date, et cetera. So that will be a key post. And then last thing I'll leave this with you. The session, when you really realistic listening to your session, it probably wasn't as good as you thought it was during your coaching session. But it also probably wasn't as bad as you were afraid it was in your memory. That's why the little bit of time before you listen is so important. Because you can take that euphoria, that excitement, and you can take that fear out of the equation and really just evaluate, hey, how good was this session really? You can be objective by waiting a little bit of time and letting and giving yourself an opportunity to take the fear or the inappropriate enthusiasm out of the picture, and you'll be able to think more, see more clearly, think more objectively about what actually happened in the session. So, Samina, that's what I prepared. I would love to open the conversation to the group for questions, for comments. Somebody probably wants to tell me I'm crazy, but let's engage around that if you would.
Thank you, Jonathan. We have a question. I have a question. Wenzo Shar is saying that. Wenzo, please speak up. Let's hear from you.
First of all, thank you so much, Jonathan. It was an absolute amazing session. And to be honest, you're the first coach I listened to talking about the topic about recordings. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
You're not crazy at all. You're amazing.
Thank you. You're very kind, Benzo. You're a good man.
Thank you. And my question is, it's a bit slightly different than the topic we talked about. But as an advice for you being an MCC coach, what's the best source to get clients? Is it a website? Is it word of mouth? Is it the social media platforms? Because me and you, obviously, we're from different generations. I'm still 29. So what's the best advice on that?
I'm not sure what you're trying to say. We're from different generations.
Age is just a number, but I'm still very young.
That's right. Well, here's what I would suggest to you. Here's my mindset on that, and it's slightly different than conventional wisdom. I use my website, and I have two different websites. I have a website for my coaching practice, jonathanreitz.com. Then I have a website for the training school. I use that as confirmation for everything else that I do. Like, for example, if you hear me talking about this and you say, I'd like to read more about that. Well, there's an article about listening to your coaching recordings on jonathanreitz.com. You can go read more there. I don't use that to initiate new clients. I use that after I've had an interaction with someone so that they can learn more or confirm what I've said in other situations. That's what I do with the website. Now, social media is, I use that for name recognition, and I'm very fortunate that I've been working at that for a while. I'm not in my late 20s. I'm not 29. I am slightly older than that. I'm not too proud to admit, but I use that for name recognition and to build a reputation. I don't do a lot of, blog posts and all of those kinds of things. I do a lot of personal interactions. I'll do, like, somebody will say, hey, I'm thinking about how to do this. And I'll say, well, here are my thoughts about that. Here's how I handle something like this. And I throw that out. But then I always point people back to the website because, again, that's confirmation. That's confirmation. But in my coaching practice, I hope you don't laugh at this. I hope you don't go, man, that's an old guy right there. But you know how I get more clients the strategy that gets me more clients than anything else is phone calls and texts. And I contact 3 people every day. And truthfully, I'm not even worried about whether or not I get them. I worry about reaching out to them. Like, for example, I might call somebody up and say, hey, Venzo, we haven't talked in a while. It'd be great to hear from you. Love to touch base with you, just get a sense of what's going on. Here's my number. Give me a call back at your convenience. Sometimes they do. And we work through the process of what's going on for them. And sometimes the opportunity involves engaging around a coaching conversation. I do the same thing with a text every once in a while to some folks. 3 people a day. Takes less than 10 minutes. 75% of my clients in the last 5 years have come from one of those approaches. Now, if we get into a conversation, say, hey, this kind of thing's come up. I said, I have something on jonathanreitz.com that you might want to look at about that. I can refer them back to that, and they can sign up for coaching or for training straight from the website. You can do that. You can attach that, but that's confirmation. The only thing I do outgoing is those 3 phone calls and texts every day. And I would urge you to begin to build a contact list. Just saying, hey, we haven't talked in a while. Now, I have a huge advantage here because 24 years I've been doing this. And you can, who do I call and text? Sometimes it's former clients. Sometimes it's people from my ICF chapter. Sometimes it's somebody that sends me contact information on LinkedIn or something along those lines. Any one of those opportunities will start the conversation about, hey, what might this look like? How might this come together? So that would be a strategy that I would throw out to you, and that has served me really well. All right,
Thank
so
you
that was a
so
long.
much.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And
Yeah,
concerning the calls, you're absolutely right. I've been doing sales all my life, and the best approach would be cold calling. It's always going to work. So thank you so much for today, really.
You bet. My pleasure. My pleasure. My pleasure. So do we have other questions, Samina? That was a long answer to the first one.
Eddie. We have Eddie. Thank you, Jonathan. We have Eddie. He's been raising his hand since a long time. Eddie, go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Sure.
This is a dimension that is quite mind-blowing. Now, I have a few questions. Is it possible to also think that certain things or approaches that work in certain cultures may be a little different how they work in other cultures? I'm saying this because where I am, it is practically impossible to convince a person that you would do a recording of what he is coming to disclose to you as a private discussion, something that should be confidential. And then you're talking about recording. In fact, it is a move that will bring about credibility problems, because I live in Nigeria, and we are kind of loud a bit, and it is easier for someone to misunderstand the fact that you're going to record a private conversation he's holding with you. Man, that is unbelievable. You see, I know it can work in other cultures, but in the kind of culture we live in right here, that is a big thing to attempt. I don't know if I made some sense.
Anyways. Yeah. Eddie, I don't disagree with that. What I would urge you to consider is to let the client decide. Walking into that conversation with the decision already made, this is not going to work in our culture. That's what I'm trying to urge you to think beyond. That's what I'm urging you to think beyond. Is if you are, it's worth exploring. I don't have any particular experience in Nigeria. I do in Tanzania. Related, not the same, I realize. I would urge you to begin to plant the seeds for that approach, and I think you might be surprised that there's more openness than maybe you anticipate in that process. So definitely, definitely. Give the client the opportunity to decide. Now, you will have to decide whether or not you want to work with someone that you can't record, and that's an extreme position. I recognize that. I 100% recognize that. So, do what makes sense for your business. Do what makes sense for your coaching practice.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll give it a try.
You bet. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that. I'm sure our attendees are going to benefit from that. One last question from Nawal. She wants to know, and I'm sure everyone else does too, do you get coached?
I do. I actually have two separate coaches. And one coach specializes on, well, technically, I guess I have three, because I have a supervisor as well. I have a small business coach that coaches me on the development of my training school and my coaching practice. And he's actually where that idea of making the 3 phone calls every day came from. His name is Mark LeBlanc. So he and I coach. Right now, we're working on sort of an inconsistent schedule. So it's sort of an as needed situation. Secondly, I have a mentor coach. The mentor coach that worked with me to get my MCC, I still see 4 times a year to coach on my coaching skills. And then I have a supervisor. I work with a woman I work with a woman named Jillian Walter, who is in Switzerland, and she is an accredited supervisor, and works with me on all of the various things that a supervisor would cover in the course of engaging for ongoing coach development. I am 100% convinced that coaches who are serious about results for their clients should be coached. No, this doesn't happen by accident. None of this happens by accident. It takes intentional and focused effort to make a difference in the course of that process. So.
All right, guys, thank you, Jonathan. For further queries, we have the email on the chat box, hquedcoachtransformation.com, for any further queries you might want to field to Jonathan. Absolutely. Or anyone else, right? And well, Jonathan has been wonderful, very insightful, and I must say a multifaceted program aimed not only at reviewing, but how we must self-assess too. It
Absolutely.
will help students trying to qualify for the ICF program as a coach. It helps them see through their competency markers and also not focus too much on what is required against what should be there as a coach from your side.
Absolutely.
Wonderful again to have you here. Thank you so much, and a good night to all of you. Thank you, attendees, for the long session. We have gone above and above, but I'm sure you have enjoyed it with Jonathan as much as I have too.
Well, thank you for having me, Samina. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to be here.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Jonathan, and good night.